folks jumping on, but to respect everyone's time, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Linda Barbado, and I work in the College of Graduate Studies. I am the Outreach and Compliance Coordinator. So if any one of you visits Grow or is able to come onto campus and visit Grow, you'll see me there with some of our events. The other part of my job is to work with students who are publishing a thesis or dissertation. And I work with the formatting. So I like to tell everyone that semester you graduate, we'll become best friends. So
Mhm.
we'll be working together in that capacity. Thank you for joining us in our virtual workshop for our professional and writing in graduate school, presented by our wonderful Associate Dean, Dr. Marverine Oliver. And before we get started, if you weren't able to RSVP, if you would like these PowerPoint slides at the conclusion of this presentation, I'll be happy to send them to you. You're more than welcome to send me a private chat with your email address, and I will forward that information to you. And so, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Oliver.
I'm glad to see you all here today. This is a workshop we offer every semester at the beginning of the semester. And we keep offering it because students seem to keep wanting it. So my goal is not to teach you how to write, um, but just to introduce you to some broad concepts about writing at university that may be different than what you've been doing. So Um, as Linda said, you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint. The PowerPoint is text dense because we send it out. So I'm not going to put it on screen. I'd rather be able to see you or see the chat than stare at a screen and essentially read it to you. Um, Mostly because I really don't like people to read PowerPoints to me, so I'm not going to do it to you. Um, So here's the few goals we have, that we will help you understand more about writing expectations at the graduate level, that you will be able to identify some of the strategies you use for writing, and be aware of some resources that are available to you for expanding the resources you use or have available to you, that you will uh, have more understanding of what professional written communication looks like at the university. And you'll know where to find university resources to help you. So it's not a writing class. It's a here's how you can, here's some things you need to know, and here's some things you can do to help yourself or get some help. It matters in part because the concern about writing well enough for grad school is one of the biggest concerns that we hear from people. And that's not just here, it's all over the US. That's especially true for people who have been out of school for a while. Maybe you got your degree several years ago, you went off, you've been in the workforce, and maybe you're still in the workforce, but you just don't know that you have the confidence to write for a master's program or a doctoral program. Another concern is the time it takes. It takes time to write, it takes time to write well. And most of the students here, most of our students are doing multiple things and filling multiple roles. And so maybe you're a grad student and a spouse and a parent and have aging parents. You have a lot going on. So, and then the other thing that contributes to a lack of confidence is just lack of knowledge about how to utilize best scholarly resources. Being able to write well professionally is also a critical skill in industry, business and industry. Those of you who have been out in business know that being able to write in such a way that people understand what you're saying and such a way that people see you as professional is really important. Sometimes on campus, students will see a writing assignment as just another box to tick off. Okay, here's one more thing I've got to do. I've got to write this essay, check it off. I've got to write this thesis, check it off, or this dissertation, check it off. And people may not realize that in grad school, professors' expectations may be a bit higher, probably are higher. Okay, I'll just say it, they are higher than they are for undergrad students very often. That's more true than not true. And there's not like an official difference between undergraduate writing and graduate writing. It's not like there's a rule book you can go look at. There are some broad differences, though, that you want to keep in mind. And one is that in grad school, writing is really about more than just fulfilling an assignment. You really want your writing to have more relevance, maybe. And that's particularly true for those of you in doctoral programs, but it's also true for people in master's programs, depending on what you want to do when you leave here. Graduate school writing often involves summarizing and synthesizing information and then putting it back on paper so that an instructor can tell that you're thinking critically rather than just given to lists, for example, that you're thinking critically and you're drawing information out of quotes you receive rather than just listing a quote and another quote and another quote and another quote. We want to be able to see evidence of thinking. Often, the formatting and the language and vocabulary are really specific to the field. So I come out of counseling, so we write using APA style and format, for example. We have a language that's peculiar to counseling and some other mental health disciplines. If you go over if you're in biology, first of all, that's not APA. They use their own style guides that are usually related to journals, but also their language, their professional language is just different. And so it becomes, in some ways, it's hard. It's a bit easier because you're working in a discipline that's an area of specialty for you or is becoming an area of specialty for you. So it becomes more and more familiar the further you go. You want to follow the conventions of your discipline. So whatever I'm telling you here today, you want to pay more attention to what your professor tells you about how that particular professor wants things written. I work with Linda with all the thesis and dissertations. I'm one of the last sets of eyes on your paper. And that's part of what we look for is how is it formatted? Are things consistent? Do they look like other things in that discipline? And we even reach out to professors sometimes in a discipline to say, wait, we're seeing this. Is this an okay thing in marine biology? Yes, it is. Okay, we're good with it. Does that make sense to everybody? You can always throw things in the chat, by the way, if I don't see questions or comments, Linda will. Another thing that's different in grad school is that the relationship between you as a student and your professor may be different than what it was in undergrad school, at least with some of your professors. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that in grad school, professors expect people to be able to operate more independently. Many grad faculty members are less willing to chase people down. At the same time, the classes are often smaller, so relationships may be different in the sense of being closer and having more mentoring going on a regular basis. So it's not all a good thing or a bad thing. It is different. Your relationship is different. You may have more one-to-one interactions with your professor than you did as an undergrad. You may have more small group interactions with your professor than you had when you were an undergrad, depending on your discipline. The amount of detail and step-by-step instructions may be different. If I give an assignment, I'm going to give a really complete and full assignment, but I'm not going to necessarily, as a grad faculty member, expect to have to list out each tiny step that we do the same every time. You may get less feedback on your assignments. It depends on your class even more than your discipline and what you're learning to do. There's also a fairly high expectation that students will correct their own work. As I say that, remember that all students are different. I mean, all faculty are different, even in the same program. And you may be wondering what this has to do with writing, but more than you think. We'll get there. There was a book out years ago, and the title of it was Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. It was about 20 years ago. And what you don't tend to think about is a panda with that punctuation in there. Okay. So I bring that up because in grad school, a reasonable command of basic mechanics of writing is expected. And if you're lacking those, the expectation is that you will do some things to take care of them. The writing center we have here, by the way, is fabulous. And they will meet with you online as well as in person. And if you tell them what you're needing help with, they'll help you learn how to do whatever that is. But things like being able to punctuate sentences so that what your meaning is clear to your reader is important. And it's expected. Being able to write a complete sentence is important. It might be surprising how often we see incomplete sentences in the middle of formal papers. Some of that's lack of skill, but some of it is simply that people are they've got all these thoughts they're trying to get down on paper, and it makes perfectly good sense to you what you've written, but until you get some space from it, I mean, I do it, everybody in the office does it, but until you get some space from it and go back and look at it, you may not even see that you've done that. So writing, mechanically, the mechanics of writing are just basically important. Basic grammar is important. And that has to do with how we put words together, to create sentences and to create paragraphs. Again, it's not just a kind of prissy expectation. It has to do with being clear. We want clarity. Eat, shoots, and leaves without any punctuation says something really different than what I said at the beginning with all the commas in it. Does that make sense to everybody? So let's talk about writing strategies a bit. And when I talk about strategies, what I'm talking about is how you go about writing. And to get better at it, you really need to think about it for yourself, to reflect on what your strategies are. Everybody's different. For me, it never worked really well to write a detailed outline and then start writing my paper. I was taught to do that from elementary school through junior high and high school and through my undergrad English courses. It didn't work then, it doesn't work now. I would probably write something and then go back and do an outline unless I had to turn the outline in first, because that's just not the way my brain organizes. So for me, I read a lot and I'm thinking about things in my head, and then I'm writing sections, and then I'm pulling the material together and putting it in some sort of order and working on it that way. That works way better for me most of the time. Not all the time, most of the time. Some of you may do something similar. Outlines may not be your best thing. For others of you, having that outline written down somewhere, even if it's not in great detail, but just having some ideas about the order you want things to go in that are actually written out somewhere, can be really helpful and help move you along. Again, the key is to know that about yourself. When you think about what works for you with writing, think about whether it changes depending on the kind of writing you're doing. If you're writing an essay for a literature class, or for your to discuss some theoretical thing in physics, I can't even frame what that would be correctly because I'm not at all a physics person. Is the way you go about writing different than if you were writing a letter to your best friend in Alabama? Probably, but I don't know that. For some of you, having music on in the background is an asset. For others of you, having music on is definitely not what you want to be doing, because pretty soon you're singing along or you're dancing along or you're with the music. That's where you are. That's me, by the way. I can't listen to music when I'm trying to write because I go towards the music, and it doesn't matter what kind it is. What other strategies have you used to write? Is somebody willing to share that? You can unmute and do it, or just type something in the chat box.
Saying, I'm more like you are. I've never gravitated towards writing outlines and saying this is the framework and I'm sticking to it. I don't work that way. My mind is it feels like this is going to crazy word to use, but it feels like it's a multi-dimensional cognizing synthesis of things that I'm picking, and I make notes and it's happening in here, so that when I'm ready, that I'm ready to put something down, now it starts to come out and I have an idea as to where it's going because I've already seen the end point. And so as I write, I periodically will come back and make sure that I'm following that connect the dots that's happening in my head.
Makes perfectly good sense to me because it's how I do that. Thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually the person who writes the outlines. I still tend to do it to this day, even when I'm packing. Sometimes it can be a blessing and sometimes it's a curse, right? Sometimes it's just me kind of overthinking things. So I think to your point, it's good. I kind of have to get a feel of when I really need to do one and when I don't.
What you said there is just really so important. Having a feel for when you need to do one thing versus another thing is a huge part of being reflective about your writing, and then using strategies to make that better, or being able to recognize when, whoa, the way I'm normally doing things didn't work and I need to try something else for this, at least for a while, at least to get me going. It's really common when etiquette likes to free write. Okay, and flow your ideas. And then, okay, I see, pick points from those to formulate her outline and then create the fuller piece. So it's a kind of this multiple element process too. Yeah. when I was teaching, and I taught, and I had a lot of dissertation students of my own, people would always get stuck somewhere in the process. I mean, it's just a normal, dissertations are long. People get bored and they're ready to be off and doing something else. And also life is happening. And so people get stuck. And so then it's time for me as a chair to be able to come in and say, tell me what you've tried. And what can you do different? How can you do something differently? Or I may prescribe some things, try doing this and try doing this and see how that works for you. Because the fact that one way of doing it usually works for you doesn't mean it's always going to work for you. And it doesn't mean that you are losing your ability to write. And it doesn't mean that you've developed a writer's block. Although it's possible to develop writer's block. The Writing Center, by the way, is a great place for that too. But sometimes you can get yourself unstuck by just trying different strategies. And you can also talk to others about strategies they use to write. And when hopefully you'll have some peers in your program that you know over time, and you have a chance to see them work and how they work and have a sense of who you would be willing to talk to, or you would be interested in hearing something from, and you could share ideas with them too. But the thing is to just be clear that there are multiple ways to do it. Know what your own best strategies are and use the heck out of them. And then when they're not working for you, do something else. And maybe for me, that's going back and thinking about, okay, how do I outline what I have so far? Because since I don't normally work from an outline, what pieces do I know I'm missing? Is there one of these I can pull out and work on? Does that make sense? It doesn't mean that it would be there. I couldn't tell if he had his hand up or just disappeared. Okay. There was a hand like this on somebody's screen, and then they were
I think he
gone.
was trying to reconnect. So if he comes
Okay.
on, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Music, other distractions, all of those sorts of things. Pay attention to what works for you. Okay. So I'm going to give you some other general tips. One of them is this big red circle here. TLDR, too long didn't read, that thing that you see in social media. Y'all familiar with that? Yeah. Okay. You don't want to, I'm sure you are. I had to go look it up about a year ago because I kept seeing it in places. One of the things you don't want to do with communication coming out of your classroom, thank you, Linda, from your instructor, is just think, oh, this is too long, I'm not reading it, or I'll just skim it. That's one of the that's one of the places that you will end up creating difficulty for yourself if you're not careful. Part of the whole writing in grad school also has to do with being able to read and take in what your instructor or others are telling you. So read the syllabus for any instructions they have about writing. If they tell you a format to use, use it. If they give you rubrics, pay attention to them. Did anybody not have rubrics in your undergrad work or your previous work? Some of those have gotten really detailed. Different faculty do that differently. And also different colleges may have different ideas about that. In my program, we were pretty detailed about rubrics, and students knew how much various portions of an assignment were worth, so if one portion of an assignment is worth half the points and the other four are only worth a total of half the points, and it gives students an idea about where to put more of their energy. It seems like I shouldn't have to say that probably, but people don't necessarily read everything. Syllabi have gotten really long. You may have a syllabus that's over 20 pages long, and they're that long because there's all this have to language that we are required to put in them now. Various policies of the university or the university system. We don't put all that in there because we love seeing it there. We're required. There's some stuff that's just required by the system and by the state. And then we have to have learning objectives, learning outcomes in there. And we also need to have a schedule in there, and we need to have assignments in there and instructions for assignments, so they can get really, really long. And then we're given an order that we may have to use. And so the logical progression that would maybe make it most user-friendly to you may not be the progression we're allowed to use. So at least look through it. I recommend to students that they give a quick read to all their syllabi and use a highlighter or something. Do something and mark things that you know that you need to pay attention to, so that you can have a sense of what you're doing. Also, it really helps if you need to email your instructor, if the instructor doesn't have to email you back and say, read the syllabus, because it's clearly outlined in the syllabus, So you can also then ask questions. Faculty aren't perfect. You already know this. So I may think I've been entirely clear with my instructions, but you know what? Linda reads it and she's thinking, what? What did you mean by this? And you have to be able to have those kind of conversations. If your discipline has a required style guide, use it. If they have a requirement for how they want headings on papers, use them. If an instructor tells you, okay, this is an essay type exam, but use bullet points. You don't have to write everything out in paragraphs or whatever, then that's fine. Just find out what's acceptable to your instructor. Sometimes we don't want to read all that excess stuff. We just want to see that you know the points. And be clear about what kind of paper you're writing, because a literature review is really different from a reflective paper. And if your instructor is asking you to write a reflective paper, they're asking you to think about how you think about, or think about how you do, and share that part of it, not just the information itself. So that will be helpful to you as you write. Questions so far? Is this hitting what you need?
For those that joined a little bit after we started, I just wanted to reiterate, we have a PowerPoint presentation, but Dr. Oliver and I also too, we don't want to read it to you. We want to make sure we have an open discussion like we are now. You all feel free to jump in with your questions. But if you haven't already done so and you would like to, I can send you that PowerPoint presentation, the slide deck at the conclusion of this presentation. Just simply private message me, Linda, with College of Graduate Studies. And if you send me a private message in the chat, your email, I will be happy at the conclusion of the presentation to send the slide deck to you.
Yeah. We will send you all this stuff if you let us know you want it and make sure we have your email address. A few other quick tips. If you really want to improve your writing, oh yeah, it's very icky. Thank you, Nikki. Yes. Make writing a routine part of your practice. If you have to, put it in your calendar. And if you have assignments, by the way, that are writing assignments, you know how to do backwards planning, everybody. So you have the due date and then you back up several days so that you aren't looking at your calendar on Wednesday and realizing you have a major paper due Friday. I mean, that's just another one of those icky feelings, is to find that out. It doesn't mean that you need to necessarily do everything in advance, but you need to be able to think through your time and how you want to use it. Another quick tip is actively seek feedback. You can ask for feedback from your instructor. Many instructors will provide that prior to grading if they have time. But you can also get that from peers in your program as you begin to know people and know whose words you would want to hear. You can seek that. In some programs, there may be even part of the assignment may be to critique each other's work, and then the critique itself is graded. Find readers outside your field. That can be really helpful, because if people outside your field at least understand your words, they may not understand the technical parts of what you're writing, but they understand what you're trying to say, basically. That's a good indication that you're being clear. The Writing Center, like I've mentioned before, yeah, you want to seek them out, and you can meet with them online. And grad students are entitled to see them. How often, Linda? I thought you just knew that.
I believe
So-
from my understanding with Sarah Pons and their team, as often as you need assistance, they're there. I mean, they're
Yeah.
just like,
Yeah,
itching to help. And in there have a lot of virtual opportunities too in different hours
yes,
for those that work.
yes. And even things like, I need help learning how to, I need help doing transitions, like between paragraphs or something. They'll help you do that sort of thing. What they won't do is serve as your personal editor. They don't do that for any of us, including faculty, but they will help you do what you need to do. Also, I do recommend that you finish things in time to be able to proof it. Finishing a paper at 5 and turning it in at 6 that you hadn't even had time to read through is how you end up with incomplete sentences that are things you go back and look at later and say, what was I thinking? Because you just didn't have time. And if your word processing program has editing functions on there and spell checks, use them. Don't trust them. It's the final word, but pay attention to them. Sometimes they're wrong, or they make a suggestion that's not what you're going for. And know that revision is a good thing. It's a good thing. The other thing that can help you with your writing is reading a lot. Because you just get a feel for what language sounds like when you read a lot. So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in your field. Reading in your field helps if you're writing a professional paper in your field, because you know sort of how things need to sound. But reading, period, can be really helpful to your writing. I'm going to keep going a little further with, we are going to need the hour, I think. Okay, with general tips for writing. Make sure that you have a structure so that the flow is organized. Usually you're going to move from the broad to the specific or the specific to the broad. What's confusing is if you go back and forth. It's confusing for your reader. If you're broad and then you go specific and then you're specific and go broad and it can feel chaotic and give people trouble following you. Headings can be helpful if your paper is long enough to have headings. But generally, if you tell me early in your paper that you're going to talk about yellow, blue, and green, then I want to read about yellow, blue, and green, and probably in that order. Because otherwise, if you're talking about complex ideas, I'm going to get lost. And I'm going to have to be scrolling up and down to figure out what you're talking about. And you don't want that. You want people to get it as they go through. Does that resonate with y'all? Yeah? Okay. Avoid real casual language in your papers. It doesn't happen too much with my grad students. Didn't happen too much, but did occasionally happen that I'd read something and all of a sudden sounded like I was reading something on social media or even reading a newspaper article, an opinion piece or something. And the tone was just off. So you want to pay attention to the tone in your discipline. It doesn't mean you can't ever include humor. You can. You just need to make sure that that's a good fit for what you're writing about and for that instructor. I love personally colloquial speech. And I love the way my grandmother talked, for instance. And I still use phrases like that. I don't write them in my papers, because that's not where you want to read that. It's not where your faculty is going to want to read that. So and avoid cliches, just try to avoid things that are really trite and that are cliched. In other words, what you're shooting for is a professional voice, a professional written voice. As I talk about it, I'm afraid that it makes it sound real dry. It doesn't have to be dry. Your topic will dictate that to some degree. Reading a counseling paper rarely feels as dry to me as reading a chemistry thesis, because it doesn't bring up the same feeling. Although I can recognize that chemistry work is really, really, really important if we want batteries that work. So be appropriate to your field. And the other thing that I would say for broad tips is follow the instructions on your assignment. And yeah, we notice, there's a strategy that's taught to people who have to speak before the public, like and talk to reporters or that sort of thing, that has to do with basically answering the question you want to ask rather than necessarily the question they ask you. That doesn't work in writing academic papers for your instructor. Pay attention to what the instructions are and respond to those. You can add things in, but you want to make sure that you cover what you were asked to cover, or else the chances are high that you're just going to lose points, not because what you wrote wasn't really good, but because you left out a major element. So make sure you follow instructions. Okay. I spoke a minute earlier about the importance of clarity. I'm going to come back and hit on that just for a minute more. It really is important, and writing clearly takes effort. It is not, I don't know about you guys, but it's not uncommon for me. Like, you wouldn't write "you guys." There's one of those phrases you don't write in your paper. But it's not uncommon for me to write an email, especially if it's a difficult email, and then need to let it set and come back to it maybe more than once. And if it's a particularly difficult one and I'm concerned about the tone, I may get somebody in the office to come read it before I hit send. I'm not going to abuse somebody verbally in email. I'm not concerned about that. But that whole thing about tone and how you want to communicate something and what your intention is important. If it's appropriate, use concrete examples. And again, it will depend on your assignment and your instructor. And try to avoid being wordy. I'm wordy. I use 15 words when 6 will do. I can write multiple clauses and punctuate them well, I will say, in a single sentence. Well, no, that's not what people want to read. And so I have to really force myself out of that. I don't need to use 15 words when 6 will do. I need to find 6 or 7 good words instead. And that, for me, is hard. I've had some students who are the opposite. They run out of words too quickly. They don't quite give enough. Like, tell me a little more, tell me a little more. So finding whatever that just right spot is for you is something that you just work with and play with. Were you going to add something, Linda?
No, I was thinking about some stuff that we were writing. I'm like, I really could probably dial it back. I was thinking about something I sent you earlier, and I thought I probably could have said that in 2 sentences, not in 2 paragraphs.
Yeah. Yeah, we just want to make sure people understand. So we add a lot. Like I said, if the paper is or whatever you're writing is such that it's appropriate, use headings and subheadings so people can follow you. Use transitional phrases, but in all caps, use them appropriately. So, however, is a transitional word, but sometimes there's a however thrown in as a transitional word, and there's no however there between the previous sentence and what the however is introducing. The stars are in the sky. However, grass is green. Seriously, I mean, that's not how that's done. So be thoughtful about however, or in some, or in contrast to. If you use that phrase, then contrast something. I think sometimes we get the notion that we should add them because we've been taught to add transitional phrases, but we haven't been taught how to do it well. So just think about that. You're better off without them than to have however the grass is green. Okay. Be simple in your sentence construction. Don't have multiple clauses in the same sentence with lots of commas and semicolons everywhere if you can avoid it. And let somebody else read your paper who hasn't been involved in your work. Because again, somebody you trust, whose judgment you trust. Are we good with it so far? Because I'm going to switch gears. All right. I want to talk just a minute about things like just general professional communication in grad school. One of the things that we sometimes hear, complaints is a bit of a strong word, but hear things about is how students email. Sometimes students use email the same way they use social media, and so they might type IDK instead of typing out I don't know. Well, they might not know that, this one I'm writing to is 72 years old and she doesn't know what IDK means. Alternative people assume that we do know all that. Anyway, but again, it's about tone. So you want to do it like you're writing a business email. address your faculty member as Dr. So-and-so or Professor so-and-so, unless you're in a program where faculty and grad students call each other by their first names and you've been in the class long enough to know that. Even that can be risky if you're doing it in email. It's one thing to call me Marvarine here in the office, but if you're addressing a professional email to me, then it's probably better to say Dr. Oliver. I mean, our professional emails are here forever. Everybody has access to them. I mean, that's just true. So be thoughtful about that. You want to, trust me, on this, you want to include your whole name. You want to include what class you're in. Some of your faculty or members are teaching 3 or 4 classes, and they may have 20 or 30 people in each class, and they don't know what class everybody's in. I mean, it's in an undergrad, it's even worse. You know, people may have classes of 50 or 60. So if your instructor doesn't have to spend 10 minutes trying to figure out, okay, is she taking intro or is she taking methods? To find some context for your question, that's going to be way better. So use the address and then tell them who you are and what class you're in, especially if you're writing about a class or a class assignment. Tell people, the professor, as clearly as possible what the problem is or the issue is or what it is you're wanting to discuss. If you have done some things to try to solve it already or to find an answer, let them know so that they're not just writing back and telling you, well, try A, B, and C when you've already tried A, B, and C. Just tell them you've done A and B and C and haven't been able to resolve this. If you need to see them, say so, that you would really like an online or a face-to-face meeting. You don't want to write a novel, because who has time for all that in the middle of all the emails you get and your faculty members get, but make it enough. So you're looking for that just right space. But do an appropriate salutation. I mean, my own students that I had a while, it was no big deal for them to write, hey, Dr. O, or just, hey, ... That's fine. We knew each other. We had a relationship. But for a student I've never met before or who's just coming into my class, that might not strike the same tone. I'm really casual, so the truth is, for me, it wouldn't bother me, but I can tell you there are faculty that would bother. So just be smart about how you do it. It's important to know what approaches are best fit the person you're addressing, just like it's a good thing for people to know what approaches best work with you. If it's your student in your classroom or your supervisee or a colleague you're working with, it's really nice if they are aware of the best ways to approach you and respect that. Yeah, so do that. You don't need to be so formal that you're just being robotic. A relational touch is fine. I mean, we thrive that way. For a while, it was required that we, faculty and staff, only respond to you using your email, your university email address. Concerns about confidentiality, that sort of thing. As I understand it, that's no longer a requirement. With that said, it is a good idea to write your faculty or staff from your university address, because just like your home computer, we get a lot of spam. And if we don't know you, and we're dealing with 200 emails that day, what may be catching our attention first is the things that are clearly from a university email address. So it can be wise to use your university email address. If you don't know already, I'm sure you all know, you can forward your university email to your favorite email account, so it goes there. But yeah. There was something else that I was going to add in here. Oh yeah. Sometimes we may miss an email from you. It is acceptable to follow up that email. Do recognize that just like for you, you're likely not to get if you send me an email at 4:30 in the afternoon, you're likely not to get a response that night. Sometimes you will, but and some faculty members don't respond to emails on the weekends. Hopefully they will tell you that in their syllabus. They'll tell you their communication policy. But if you don't get a response in a reasonable amount of time, it's perfectly acceptable to, dear Dr. So-and-so, I'm so-and-so in Math 101. I'm having a problem with X. I emailed you on blah, blah, blah. I would really like to, whatever, make an appointment, whatever it is. And you will get a feel pretty soon, I hope, in your class about what kind of tone would be acceptable with your instructor. For me, it was, please nag me. If you don't hear back from me in 48 hours, please send me a gentle nag. So it got where students would put gentle nag in the subject line. That's okay. Because if I haven't answered in 2 days, then I've missed it. I just missed it. And I don't want to do that to students. Here's some don'ts. Don't email your instructor and ask them what course you're taking from them. That's not a good plan. And yes, people do it. Fewer grad students do it than undergrads, but yeah. Try not to ask for information that is clearly in the syllabus. So take a look at your syllabus and make sure that it's not in there. Like everywhere else in your life, it's a good idea not to email them when you're really ticked off, because that tone will come across and it just doesn't work well. So write it and delete it, or do whatever you need to do, and then wait till you've calmed down and you can do what you need to do in a really professional manner. Don't ever threaten your faculty members. You may feel like it sometimes, and it may even be justifiable sometimes, but just don't do that. Again, this stuff has a life of its own, and if then there's something that really needs to be a formal complaint, if you have issued threats or been abusive in your language, it doesn't go as well as your case moves up the line, because charges like misconduct are taken seriously, and you have a right to complain. If your email is going to be really long and complicated, it may be better to ask for a time to talk on the phone or meet on Zoom or in their office. Some things are just too complicated. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Email is probably the most common, and telephone, but more lately, I think email is probably the most common way we communicate back and forth if we're not in class. You also have through your online, like Blackboard, it's still Blackboard, it'll go to another system by fall. Some of you will go to another system in the summer. But anyway, there's a way to communicate within those courses as well. Your instructor may have preferences for how you do that. And if they do, they should let you know that. I want things to come to my email, or in a learning management system, I want it to automatically shoot it to my email so that I see it right away and not Thursday, next Thursday when I happen to check the course again. So, but find out. You can also just use memo formats. All of you know how to do memos, to, from, about, date, short little paragraph kind of things. So it might not look exactly like that in an email format, but memo formatting is pretty standard, even in the university. You can also write letters. If you can write a good business letter, you are welcome to do that. You can even send that as an attachment in an email. Just do your own little heading and send that. Okay. Questions? Writing is not the horrific thing that some people may be concerned about, sometimes are concerned about. It does take some thought. And I think that's part of what I wanted to put across today. Here's some things to think about and consider. I would like to know from you. Oh yeah, we're doing well with time. Give me one or two takeaways from today for you, whether you chat it or unmute yourself.
I think that was kind of obvious to me, but then I'm really glad that two things actually went a little deeper into, was just addressing faculty, and just always staying on the PC side, respectful with the title and last name at the beginning until such a time warrants, if it indeed does or does not.
Mhm.
Because I'm in a field in my area where there are many people with doctorates, but again, we all know each other, so everybody's on a first name basis, and then I just forget, and I'm out calling people by their first name, and it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not my same circle of people. But also bearing in mind, giving a little time, I guess being extremely mindful, and I know what I've had to do. Well, let me finish my sentence. Being mindful with when assignments are due,
Yeah.
because to look at the syllabi as I have them, it's a lot of stuff going on. And I can even look at the calendar, and that's really great that it's got my class dates, but then I've got other things all over the place due in different times.
Yes.
So I'm having to transfer that out in a way that makes it easier for me to follow, so that I can backtrack and give myself some thinking time, writing time, space, go back and read it again. And I think that's probably my greatest fear right now, is that I will accidentally miss a due date.
Yeah. I can't function without a calendar, because all of the things are on there, all the due dates for everything and the reminders. And because you're right, there's so many things. Plus life. I mean, whether that's picking up kids or going to a doctor's office, or I need cranberry juice, I have to have, you've just got so many things. Yeah. What else? And thank you, Sandra.
I think the one thing that because I'm a full-time elementary school teacher, I am a mom of 3 young boys. I am a wife, and we just got done with doing stock shows, so I'm very busy. But I think the one thing that makes me feel a little bit better is that the basics are all the same for everybody. It's making sure that you have everything you need before you get started, but it might be a different process. But one thing that does make me feel better that I wasn't aware of is you were talking about the writing center and that I could reach out to my advisors and that they're always there to help me if I do hit that wall to help me either figure out a way to maneuver around it or get over it.
Yeah, yeah, they are. I will tell you that the faculty here and the staff here are really invested in helping people be successful. And so whether that's calling the writing center or talking to your college academic advisor, are you in the College of Ed? So if you're talking to Maria Fonseca, or if you need something from one of us, and by the way, grad studies, you can always call us. And if we're not the people who have the answer to your question, we will get you to the right person. And we do that. We do warm handoffs, by the way, we don't just say, oh, we'll call Lucy over in XYZ office. I mean, somebody might call Lucy right there with you on the phone with them, yeah, so we'll help you get something solved.
Our mantra, Dr. Oliver Wright, is when in doubt, give CGS a shout. We'd rather you start with us and then we can, because a lot of times too, and Dr. Oliver, we talk about this a lot, you and I, of, okay, get it out on paper. Don't send that email and let's back it up. Let's sleep on it. Let's rethink it. And then at the crux of it, what was really the issue, or what are we really trying to solve? And once we start pulling away all that, I guess, emotion or whatever is bottled, then, well, what's the problem? And how can we help? And how can we direct? So that's helped me a lot in going back and looking at something, because then too, we realize I wasn't even really the real core issue, and I'm asking the wrong person. I need to go back this way. So, it just cooler heads prevail, but we'll be happy to help you work it out. Like our dean says, there's no problem we can't solve together. You just got to talk to us and let us know what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah. She really believes that, by the way, our dean does. So, yeah.
Hey, what's
You can't find the people, we'll get them. Huh?
over in, is it, Dr. Robedo, or is it just Miss Linda? How do you go by?
You just call me Linda.
All right, Miss Linda. So listen, I want to just thank you guys so much for putting this on and for sharing tips, expertise, and guidance. This is really, truly appreciated, and to come together with some folks also. I'm going to go ahead, and I have to get out now because I'm at the office. I got to jump on some other meetings, but I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I will remember you guys, and I know where to find y'all.
If you know where Starbucks is at, we're on the opposite side.
Hey,
down the hall.
Done.
We're here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Sandra.
Anybody else want to throw out a takeaway?
I would I mean they've touched on some of the points that I was going to mention as well, especially about addressing emails, being in that professional environment, working with people on a day-to-day basis. You get to know who they are, so the titles and everything just kind of go out the window, but remembering that we need to tell them exactly who we are, because sometimes I think we're under the impression that, or we assume that they know who we are. So you covering, hey, don't forget to put what class you're in, and everything like that. I think that's helpful. The other thing is, with me not being in any kind of environment as far as graduating so many years ago, I think it's great to know that the Writing Center is there to help us with the transition through the graduate studies. I think for me, my biggest thing is probably going to be remembering, right, the APA style and some other formats, because I have not done that kind of writing in such a long time.
We also can tell you most of the links to the best APA formatting pages. I'm just telling you, because it's a common issue. It's a common concern. And so we have copies of it, by the way, and Grow if you're on campus. And like I said, I can't tell you how often a semester Linda sends out links about formatting tables in APA or how to do references in APA. So yeah, we'll help you do that. Writing Center is also good at APA.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Linda
Thank you.
will send.
Let
Go ahead.
sorry. I was gonna let Deborah know that I'm gonna pop in here and maybe put in my 2 cents, but I know for one of my classes, they actually put on a book that you need for APA. So check with your professors. They might have an APA book that they recommend that you can buy or rent from the bookstore that would have what they need for APA.
Okay, I'll take a look. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Right now, APA writing manual is on the 7th edition. And that's the one we have in Grow. And I know the library has a copy.
We ordered one on Amazon and we had it tabbed so that we can quick find, like, 'cause sometimes we forget, or I forget,
Yeah,
what needs to be italicized on that and what doesn't need to be. So,
yeah.
and thank you, Etika, for your comment. Appreciate it in the chat.
In the chat, yes. Thank you again for being here. And if Linda, if you registered or if you put your email in the chat, then she will be able to send you the slides so that you'll have them if you want them. There's nothing on there we didn't talk about, but we're happy for you to have them. And we hope to see you at more workshops in the future.
Thank you all very much. And my contact information will also be included. So, as well as Dr. Oliver's, if something comes up, please let us know. And again, we're happy to help you and welcome you all to the start of the spring semester. And we wish you the best. And hopefully we'll see you sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank you both.
Bye-bye.